apparently this generation can't cook. I'm 30. This chick, Smash, is 27, but maybe retarded, which is fine because I too am also kind of retarded.
I'm 27 years old.
Yeah.
In a corporate job, and I do.
Hold on, I need you to speak up. Say that again.
I'm 27 years old.
Yeah.
In a corporate job, and I do not know how to spell.
That's not good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, but that's not good.
Because I'm from the generation where I'm in 5th grade, and I had a laptop with spell check on it.
Yeah, but I still learn how to spell.
That's ridiculous.
You didn't learn how to do the phonetic alphabet, like how to pronunciate your shit.
So now I'm 27 years old, listening to podcasts on how to sound out words.
Man, that must be a really boring podcast.
And how to spell, because I don't know how.
Okay, in all seriousness, I gotta speak in actual tone. How many? I mean, maybe it's just different, overseas, but in America, I'm 30, so we learned at least how to articulate the words and the phonetic alphabet of like how to sound out things and how to spell. But apparently, that's not being taught now, and that's why we got to get rid of our education system. I mean, Donald Trump is talking about sicking Elon on the Department of Education, and now listening to her. I mean, it's always in the eyes. You could tell. Maybe we need to start making better kids, smarter kids.
Mind you, I'm educated.
Apparently, not that educated.
I have a bachelor's and I cannot spell. Ask me how to spell any word. I can't do it. I cannot do it.
Thesis.
And if I can't spell,
THESIS.
I know my little sisters who are a generation behind me. They can't spell either. We're toast.
We're toast. Put some butter on them because they're toast. Goodbye. It makes me wonder if like her boss was like across the room and she was just trying to make a TikTok account. But it may be time to abolish the education system. Brett, let it rip.
It would be historic. It would be hugely impactful.
Like a Beyblade.
Trump can't just abolish the Department of Education with a signature. The Department of
No, he could stick Elon on it though.
Education was created through an act of Congress, so it must be abolished by a vote in Congress. However, welcome back to another episode of The Brett Cooper Show. We have some updates for you all. I'm so honored. I'm so excited to inform you all that I've got.
She's very dolled up.
So the days of me blasting in your ears and you hearing literally every single piece of my enunciation, hopefully those days are over. Also, guys, I read your comments. I removed the headphones. I got these really cool headphones that you saw in the previous episode.
I prefer
and
the
also
headphones.
You'll see them in an episode that I pre-recorded for next week. But I got these really cool headphones. They're from the 70s. We got them fixed up so that I could use them. I put it on and it just didn't feel right. And oddly, I just felt so weird wearing them, and I saw comments being like, Brett, you don't need the headphones anymore. So I have officially ditched them. We're back to the original setting. Happy to be here. But guys, today we need to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. We need to talk about
I guess I don't rock headphones either.
You guys have been watching my content for the last 3 years, even before the last 3 years, because this is something I would write about constantly and talk about in my social media videos. We need to talk about education, and more specifically, what the future holds for education under President Trump, because Trump has been signing executive orders left and right, and I know it is pissing off the left because they think that he is abusing his power, but honestly, he is doing exactly what he promised us. I mean, the theme of Trump's presidency thus far is promises made, promises kept, and listen.
He's not wrong though. Quite literally, so far, all of them. The only like niche in that, the only caveat is us taking over the Gaza Strip. I'm very pro Trump. You guys know this. I like Trump. I like Elon. I like the whole team that was a part of this wave, which wasn't just Trump, right? It is Trump. It is Elon. It is Tulsi. It is RFK. It is Kash Patel. It is JD Vance. It's all of these people. But we wanted to fix America. We don't want to fix the Gaza. We don't want to turn the Gaza into the Riviera. I don't care about that. I want to fix North Carolina.
Listen, we are getting exactly what we voted for, and we are very happy. I mean, from keeping men out of women's sports just a couple of days ago, which was just incredibly historic if you guys have not seen that photo.
Isn't it crazy that Donald Trump, the guy that said grab him by the ussy, is now the most pro-woman president maybe ever? because of this. He's at least the biggest feminist president.
Of Trump signing the executive order surrounded by young female athletes. It was, I mean, truly brought tears to my eyes.
What's up, archivist?
So many years of hard work came to that moment. It was just incredible. I mean, from that to directing our government to unseal the JFK records, so much has happened. And next up in the slate of executive orders is apparently the future of the Department of Education. And TLDR, Trump wants to abolish it. But as are many things in our political landscape right now, education is a very heated issue. And a lot of people don't understand how this would work, if Trump would even be able to abolish it. They don't understand why people even want to get rid of the Department of Education, and they're very concerned with what happens after the Department of Education has been abolished.
We want the Department of Education, before this goes into it, at least like, I'm going to try to speak for, you know, like 80% of Americans, or like I'm going to speak for the whole, hopefully, right? I think most people want the Department of Education to be abolished because, one, we just saw that kids can't spell anymore. I mean, that's pretty bad. But if we look at us globally around the world, we're like 40th. We're supposed to be the #1 superpower in the world, and we're making our kids dang near retarded when they're coming out. And this is what I believe, right? This is just my opinion now. I think the ability for critical thought, for you to be able to critically think, read in between the lines, maybe take a couple different things and contextualize them and realize how they're connected or how they're not connected, but you be able to apply your own thought to it. That's why I think we need to get rid of the education, or the Department of Education, because it's removing that aspect of kids, their creativity, their critical thinking, and turning them into cookie cutters. Because the idea for school was for the factory engineer people, for the factory job people, for people to get an education, for them to sit down, understand they need to sit down for 8 hours a day, listen to their superior, do what they're told. They're going to be graded on how well they listen and how well they retain information, and just make cookie cutter kids just to work in factories. But the world like that has changed and adapted, and our education system has not.
So we're going to try to break all of that down for you guys, answer some questions, but before we do, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the new channel if you've not
Exactly.
already, and of course,
Right
hit
now.
the notification bell to make sure that you stay up to date on all of our uploads. And
What
of
she
course,
said.
if you want ad-free episodes, a weekly advice video from me, and an exclusive newsletter for subscribers only, make sure to check out my subscriber platform, Cooper Confidential.
Yeah, I don't do all that.
Here we will also have it in the description below, along with my exclusive launch merch. But without further ado, let's of course
A crazy hot chick. I'm not saying that she's crazy hot, just crazy concept. Hot chick here has a Patreon and support thing, not for OnlyFans, for her noggin. Crazy
get
concept.
back into the topic. So
I respect it.
abolishing the Department of Education has been something that has been talked about for years at this point, but in the grand political sense, it has kind of been a fringe issue. Many conservatives and Republicans in Congress are very much against this. They support the Department of Education, and so this issue has really been propped up by libertarians like Justin Amash and limited government conservatives like my
David
favorite,
Smith.
Thomas Massie and Rand Paul. And Thomas Massie has actually tried to abolish the Department of Education multiple times at this point. It feels like he is constantly reintroducing a bill to abolish it completely, and yet it never happens. And as recently as last month, he reintroduced it yet again. On January 31st, he said, "I just reintroduced H.R. 899, a one-sentence bill to terminate the Federal Department of Education and return power back to teachers and parents." This is it, the entire bill. And the
I mean, that's beautiful.
bill reads, "Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, Section 1, terminate the Department of Education," and that's it. Literally one line. It is pretty epic. But of course, that would never pass in our modern government because, as we know, bills have to be like 700 pages long and chock full of ridiculous, random things that our government wants to spend money on.
Yeah, it's not long enough. It's got to be longer. It has to, just like the corn industry, you can't have like a normal sized relatable slong. It has to be the biggest piece of meat on the internet for you to actually be able to sit there.
Of
and
course,
goon out
this
to
has
it.
not passed. But with Trump's comeback with his focus
Sorry, I lost
on
my point
slimming
halfway
down
through that.
government, with Elon Musk's influence and the influence of Doge, eliminating this incredibly bloated, incredibly corrupt government department seems more possible than ever. And this time around, with this reintroduction, Massie actually has
It's crazy.
30
Trump has the ability to
30
get shit
Republican
done like that.
co-sponsors for this bill. So times are obviously changing. But 30 co-sponsors is still not enough. One article reads, "If a bill were to move forward in the House, the GOP would still have to pull support from lawmakers outside spite of their 53-member Senate majority, to reach the 60-vote threshold they need for the legislation to pass. So at this point, we gotta keep educating people and we gotta pray, which you can do with Hallow. Guys, I'm so excited to share that this episode is sponsored by my...
So good with the sponsors, man. What if we didn't die and get suppressed? I probably would be looking for this, but right now I'm just looking for the consistent views again.
And as we are getting very close to the start of Lent, the 40 days leading up to Easter, Hallow has an incredible 40 wait list today. And maybe we can all work together to pray for the state of education, because Lord knows our country needs it. Even though Massey has 30 Republican co-sponsors, even though Trump is talking about it, people are still against this. And it makes sense, because getting rid of anything education, dealing with education, will always be difficult, as it is a very emotional and personal issue for people involving their children. And in my opinion,
Yeah, people hear that and they think it's like the same way as a fat person at the gym telling, hey, you can't have no more donuts anymore. Not first thing in the morning. At first, they're like, oh, I don't like that. But then once you build in that habit, you build in better habits, you can start to see the change in the implementation of it. People do not like hard, drastic change right off the rip.
This is because they often conflate the existence of the Department of Education with the existence of public education in the United States, which is just simply not the case. And I think that this comes down to most people
Yeah, I think that's fair.
not even knowing the history of the Department of Education and the fact that it was never really supposed to have the power or the budget that it
Nah, people just say, you want to tear down the Department of Education? You don't want my kids to get educated? What the hell's wrong with you?
does today.
That's
like
as far as the
government
thought goes.
agencies, it has obviously overstepped its bounds. I mean, most people don't even know that it is a relatively new government department. In fact, Jimmy Carter, who just passed away, he was the one who created the Department of Education.
R.I.P.
He signed it into law in 1979, and somehow, just to give you an example, somehow over the last 40 odd years, their budget has ballooned from $14 billion to over $238 billion. That is insane. But what is even more insane
That's good
is
math.
that over these 40 years,
That's good
over
math.
that insane increase in spending and in budget, there has been no improvement in American education. Just look at this graph from the Cato
I would argue it's only gotten worse.
Institute. This is the trends in American public schooling since 1970. So the blue line right here is the total cost, the amount that we, as taxpayers,
Yeah, I love graphs. I love charts like this because holy hell. You can see our cost has gone up, the teachers, the employees, the staff have gone up, but then like realistically, like we've had no growth, and in some areas it has looked like it's gone worse.
our spending on
Science
American
for
education,
sure.
that obviously has skyrocketed. Oh, employees have skyrocketed. We're paying more people. We see where our money is going. And then let's look at reading scores, math scores, science scores. Oh, they've stayed exactly the same.
Yikes.
There has been no improvement in the slightest. Now, to give you guys a bit more backstory and context on this department and on this issue as a whole, I called my friend Ryan Gerdusky, who is the founder of the 1776 Project PAC, which is reforming school boards across the country, is trying to reform education. He is a genius on all things American education, and he broke down the history of the Department of Education like this.
Before there was a Department of Education, there was something called the Office of Education. That came out about like right after the Civil War in 1867.
That seems way more efficient. Instead of a whole ass department, this is just our office.
And the purpose of that was just to collect data, like on schools and on school, how they were performing, what books they were reading, make a document, give it to Congress.
It seems like it
That
needs
was
just to be an
basically the
AI
entire
bot now.
thing.
Someone make an
And
AI
then
bot for
when
that.
Lyndon Johnson becomes president in the 1960s, he says, hey, we really need to revamp education. The federal government needs to get really involved. And he creates Title I, which is about how to distribute money to local municipalities across the country, especially low-performing, poor municipalities. And education fundamentally changes at that point once money is really involved. Jimmy Carter runs on the idea that he's going to create a Department of Education. This is a big campaign promise of the teachers' unions. And it revamps education and broadens the scope of federal authority in the way that the federal government works with education.
And like I said at the beginning, and many of you know this, like I said, education is near and dear to my heart. This is probably the political issue that I care about the most. I feel like I have a stake in this as a young person that recently came out of the education system.
That's fair. For me, it's healthcare.
I feel like I tried every different form of homeschooling and public schooling. I went to community college. I went to a formal university. I basically tried everything
Public education, baby.
except Catholic school at this rate. And I know that there are problems. But the one thing that really stood out to me that I learned from Ryan when I interviewed him was that all of the intended functions of the Department of Education already
Like,
existed
backfired.
in our federal government prior to 1979, prior to the department actually
too
being
bloated.
created. They were just broken up into different departments based on what those departments' specialties were. They were not under one huge umbrella. And creating the Department of Education consolidated all of it and gave this department and the unions that lobbied for the creation of this department major power and control, as Ryan also covered. Listen here.
Many of the functions of
Yo,
the Department
what's
of
up, Yash?
Education were happening pre the creation, but they happen within different departments. This consolidates them and brings.
And what's bad about these departments, sorry to interrupt you here, guy. What's bad about these departments is most oftentimes they don't communicate with each other, right? And if anything, they feel like they're in competition or in conflict with each other too, because it's us versus them.
All under one house, and it
For example, yeah.
really gives the teachers unions representation, and also creates a massive budget. All of the unions definitely create huge pressure. The teachers union is one of the largest unions in the country, and depending on what state you live in, they could be the largest.
Guy talks too slow
in
for
any
me.
given region.
And guys, to this day, the people who have the most control over the Department of Education, who are the major lobbyists, the major motivators behind everything they do, and that would be the teachers unions, quickly followed by the guidance counselor union. And if you don't know about the power of teachers unions, maybe we'll have to do an entire episode just dedicated to that, because
Unions are like a double-edged sword, because it's like in theory, in practice, they do work really well, but as soon it's just up until they get to a point where it becomes too manipulative and they think they have more power than they do, and then they become like this immature teenager of just not wanting to do anything and help with the greater whole, because they're like, we're not getting enough. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not.
it is truly insane. And based on the graph that we just looked at from the Cato Institute, it seems like these unions, these major lobbyists, the motivators behind the Department of Education, have cared a lot more about lining their pockets, about hiring more administrators, obviously, because the staff is growing, and pushing political ideologies instead of improving American education. In fact, in a recent op-ed for The Hill, Representative Harriet Hagman spoke on this perfectly. She wrote, "That money, in other words, the $238 billion, hasn't been effectively used to educate our young. It has
Namaste.
disappeared into the maw of the Department of Education with no accountability for failure. The departments not related to education activities are also well known. Federal bureaucrats, for example, spent 3 years seeking to replace the word sex in federal education amendments to the Civil Rights Act with sexual orientation and gender identity. They have interfered with teachers'
Oh my
ability to
God.
remove disruptive and dangerous students from their classrooms, and they have promoted a seemingly endless stream of woke policies at the expense of our cohesiveness and to undermine pride in being American. The result? They are turning out generations of children who can't read or do math and believe that America is evil. Hence why
And we can confirm there's at least a few 27-year-old educated girls out there who can't spell, who are just spending all day listening to podcasts on how to spell words.
so many lawmakers and so many conservatives like myself
This is why we got to get rid of the Department of Education.
want to see this department dismantled. It is beyond time to silence that disruption like I do with my silencer from Silencer Shop. And you all know that I am
Oh
a big
my
advocate
God,
for our
this-
Second Amendment rights, and I
Brett,
believe in being prepared and being
I am the way that this girl can loop in these sponsors. It is honestly, it's a work of art. I mean, the transition there is insane. Like, good for you.
Head over to Silencer Shop to get started today. Trust me, Silencer Shop is the easiest and best way to get your suppressor. Upgrade your guns today. But obviously, right now, this noise and this disruption to our education system has not been silenced. It is in full force, and it is not positively
Have we ever seen Brett Cooper and Ben Shapiro in the same room?
impacting the quality of our children's education in the slightest. In fact, by taking power away from the states and the parents, many argue that it has only made education worse, not just stagnant. And so, as part of his 2024 campaign, one of the ideas that Trump ran on, one of the promises that he ran on, was abolishing this department in its entirety and sending power back to the states. Just take a listen from one of his rallies.
I'm going to take the Department of Education, close it in Washington, let the states run their own education.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of an idiot, so I don't understand exactly what that would mean. I also heard him in another more recent context of saying like it wouldn't just be state departments, it may be even like county departments, and he was bringing up like New York, of like Winchester, Syracuse, Upper New York, about all of these different places having departments of their own departments of education, and it makes me wonder that like right now America definitely is falling behind, way behind on its education. Now, granted, there's a lot of kids. I do think there's a lot of kids here who can go on YouTube, who can use the internet, who are just absolute wizards. They're absolute freaks. I think Elon is finding them and bringing them into government jobs right now with the Department of Government Efficiency. But the majority of kids right now, we saw it earlier at the beginning of this, they can't spell.
We spend more money per pupil than any other.
And hell, I'm a self-claim, like, I know, am I an actual idiot? No. Do I have the ability to critical think and whatnot? For sure. But am I an idiot? Yes.
Nation in the world by far, and yet we're ranked at the bottom of every list.
Which is all true, which should be incredibly embarrassing to every American. It should be a top priority for
Absolutely.
Americans to figure out how to fix this so that we can
Health and
serve our children
education.
and our students better. And yet,
Dum
on
dum.
the left, and with many Republicans, the only solution
dum
they
dum
seem to come up
dum.
with is more money. But we are already spending an insane amount of money. And again, going back to that graph, you can see where the money goes. It goes to the unions. It goes to the administrators. It does not even go to the teachers, which we're going to talk about later. But going back to Trump and going back to his promises, promises made, promises kept.
The budget for teachers is so sad, but teachers I think have such an important job molding and teaching the next generation, and they get paid like not even middle class. They're like upper lower class paycheck. Even teachers that have been in for a while. One of my teachers, shout out Mr. Whitley, he and I were chit-chatting, and I mean, granted, $60K a year, $70K a year, that's good, but for somebody like him, he deserves double, triple that. For at least the impact that he had in my life, it's priceless.
Just this week, the Wall Street Journal revealed that Trump is actively taking steps to ready an executive order that would, quote, dismantle the Department of Education. So apparently,
Same
that
with
is
Heather
next
Headline.
in the
Shout out
pipeline.
to you,
They wrote,
Headline.
Trump advisors weigh plan to dismantle Education Department. Administration officials are discussing executive order that could shut down key functions of the agency, and that was published on February 3rd. This has got people very excited. It was trending for like 24 hours on X. But the thing is, even though this executive order would be historic, it would be hugely impactful, Trump can't just abolish the Department of Education with a signature. The Department of Education was created through an act of Congress, so it must be abolished by a vote in Congress. However,
Yeah, I don't know. At this point in time, with what Trump's trying to do, I don't know what's legal, what's not legal, what has to be pushed through Congress, what doesn't have to get pushed through Congress. But, Archivist, you're saying something really interesting here. I think they should take inspiration. I think you're saying the American government should take inspiration from foreign education systems. This is where I look at like a country like China, who's like ranked number 4, and they have arguably one of the largest populations in the world, right? And they're ranked 4th overall. I think that's super impressive just for the scale of that nation. We should at least try to be a top 10, top 8 nation in the world in terms of education. We're 40th. That's so bad.
with an executive order,
If you could say inspiration from education system, which one? Would it be India? Would it be China? Would it be Japan? What are some countries that have rockin' education systems?
Trump can break it apart.
Probably
And
gonna be
that
the
is what people are
Finnish ones.
speculating that he'll be doing. Here is how Ryan broke it down.
We want the Department of Education, certain things in the Department of Education to still happen. We want Title IX to be enforced,
Mix
right?
of all?
We don't want biological women to
Yeah, why not? Why not take the best aspects of all of them and apply it to your own?
compete with biological men in sports. That is partly Title IX. My guess is he's probably going to move Title I into basically give it back to the states almost immediately and have have very limited federal interaction as far as distribution of state money goes. And then Title IX will probably get moved to the Department of Justice, is what I imagine, or maybe HHS, Department of Health and Human Services. Whatever they have to preserve, Pell Grants will get moved to maybe the Treasury or something like that. Whatever they have to preserve will get moved to other federal departments. And the Department of Education will probably be a building with no lights on.
So, TLDR, how this would work is that many of the original core functions of the department, pre-Department of Education, pre-Jimmy Carter era, they would still exist. Title I would be protected. It would be just moved under a different jurisdiction. Title IX, everything that we fought for women, for protecting women, that would be protected. It would just be moved. It would all be reallocated and shifted around to break up this power monopoly that this department has over our education system and over the states. And you just gotta know, and I love this, that the teachers' unions are losing their minds. Because remember, they were the ones who wanted this in the first place. They are the ones who benefit the most. They are the ones who have the most power over everything this department does.
Brett
so
talks
I
at a
want you to
normal
take
speed.
a listen to my good friend, Randy Weingarten. Randy Weingarten, if you didn't know, is one of the people that I despise most.
Mandatory uniforms, subjective papers, and a nationwide subjective written exam. I disagree with the mandatory uniforms. I don't like that at all because I think that once more just pushes the narrative of taking away creative freedom, individuality, and just making more cookie cutter individuals. Right? But that's me. I didn't like uniform. I felt like it was just another thing to remove people's individuality, people's creativity, and it's just another way to strip away that and create more cookie cutter people to work at factories.
Most on the face of the earth. She's the president of
Everything else, I'm kind of down with.
the country's
I also, this is going to be crazy. I'm almost on this board now to until you're 16. Like, even if you're born American with national parents, like, or people who were born both in America, like, they're both American parents, so you don't have to worry about, like, natural right citizenship or anything like that. I think in, like, middle school or in high school, you should have to take and pass the test that every person wants to become an American citizen, you know, like that whole process, you should also be able to pass. I heard that, and I was like, you know what? That's actually, I kind of agree with that. And I think that whole process needs to be reformed and reworked, but I think every American should be able to pass the citizenship test. And I guarantee you most of us, like myself, probably could not.
Largest and most powerful teachers union, and she recently did an interview where she was screeching about Trump's plans for the Department of Education and how this would take money away from students and instead line the pockets of billionaires.
Where's the money going? Who's taking it? Are they trying to take that money that kids get for tax cuts for billionaires? What's going on?
I love the
That's why
gaslighting.
we have to
I
see
love the
what they're doing.
gaslighting.
It is illegal to take that money out of
It's
children's
illegal.
mouths.
Just listen to the words they use. They're using emotional words that inflict an emotion out of you. It's illegal. You're trying to take taxpayer money out so billionaires can save money, like take taxes out so billionaires can save money. They're trying to invoke an emotion out of you and not get you to think logically and listen to what they actually have to say.
And give it to billionaires.
See, this is why this issue is so emotional, because they say things like this: we're taking money away from your kids. Your
Thank you, Brett.
kids are gonna go hungry. They're lining the pockets of billions.
They're gonna starve. They're like the kids in Africa.
None of that is happening. Literally not in the slightest. Also, I love at the beginning, she goes, where's the money going? The money wouldn't exist in the first place because we would stop taxing people. People, American citizens, the parents of these students would be able to keep more of their money. That is where it would go. It just wouldn't go to you.
They probably are standardized, but the standardization of what they're backed by is probably BS. It's probably just as good as what comes out of a horse's rear end. It's like truthfully. And the only reason why I say that is we have books that up until recently, and I think they're getting cut off now, but it might not even be yet. But there are books that are talking like in kids for like elementary school about how to like give each other BJs and reach around to Dutch ovens and shit. Like, why are we teaching elementary school kids that? Like, they're already going to be on the internet. They're going to find that stuff naturally. We don't need some weird teachers teaching our kids that.
You, Randy, which I think is what you were most concerned about. Because again, none of what you just screeched about and basically burst into tears over is happening. None of it. Yes, you might make less money. Your $500,000 a year salary might decrease. You might have less power, but children will still be able to go to public school. Children will still have access to school lunches if that is what you're concerned about. Teachers.
What blows me away is like with the amount of innovation that we have, and this is something I see in India. This is something I've seen, hell, in other European countries as well. It's like these rural areas, you look at the schools and then compare it to maybe the suburb areas and even like inner city area. It's just the discrepancy of what the kids have access to is actually insane. And it's never the best of the best, right? It's always going to be like, it feels like it's hand-me-down. It feels like there's very few schools that are like these prestigious schools that are using the most up-to-date software. It's most oftentimes the teachers are coming out of their own pocket to funnel what's going to be in the classroom next year. And yes, the government does help with some type of subsidies, but it's never enough because most of the money is going to go to the unions. Remove laptops from the classroom. You're going to have, why? We're going into a technological future. You want kids to be able to use a laptop, but you also have to like be able to teach them how to think critically for themselves. Because once they get out into the real world, if they don't know how to use a laptop and they're over there figuring out like, what is this, the power button or the USB? Like, what is this? Or like, what do I need to stick in here? Like that's not helping anything either.
Teachers will still be paid.
Computer labs are for that.
As their salaries are set by the state. They're not even set by the Federal Department of Education. And I just want to be on record saying that I am in favor of anything that decreases the political power of these teachers' unions, that decreases the power of people like Randi Weingarten, who use her position to further her own political ideologies and to make more money for herself. So yes, Randy, that is a long way of saying that money will be allocated differently. That will change, but it will be sent to the states.
So I don't think you're going to see a massive slashing as far as spending goes. It's really who does the spending and where. So I don't think you're going to see most of it go away. There will be somewhat of a fingerprint still from the federal government on education, and then the rest will be deciphered by the states and local government.
Which, interestingly, you seem to support, Randy.
States and localities run education. They basically, that's where 90% of the funding for education goes. They already run it. They should run it. The federal government should not run it.
I'm so glad we can all agree, Randy, that the state should run education, that the federal government, with your $238 billion budget, should not be running the American educational system. So maybe that faux emotional outrage that we just saw is really not about the students, but it's about you and your pals losing political power. So hopefully...
And money at the end of the day.
Guys, those insights from Ryan, that brief history about
it always goes back to money and power.
the the Department of Education, Trump's plans, how that would actually work. Hopefully that clears this up for you, explains why this is happening and what you can expect. So yes, things hopefully
Did I go to
are
a
going
private
change,
school?
but
Brother, no, I went to a public school. I went 1 year to a Christian school in 4th grade, but then I went straight back to public school.
hopefully if this works the way that we want, fingers crossed, this means that students will be getting a better education. This means that parents and states and school boards, the people who
Like, I had a weird childhood growing up. Like, from 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, I was basically at a different school every single year.
actually understand their local students and understand what they need will be given power.
Which probably makes sense on like how like I have like a lot of trust issues and how I don't really open up to like people IRL, how I like to keep my life private because no one's ever been in my life for a long time. Like as a kid, you know, growing up like every year is a new one. Probably explains a lot.
Again, and hopefully this means that our education system will stop being run into the ground by a small sect of self-serving bureaucrats. So in my opinion, this is something that
You went to a
everyone,
private school your whole
regardless of
life?
whether you
Nice.
are on the left or the right, should be excited.
So with the private school, I'm assuming you guys had the dress code, the subjective papers, and I know India has like a couple different like nationwide exams, like the JER or the JEET.
About. And if you are worried
Or the
about this
JRE.
department being abolished in its entirety and that causing something that we've not planned for, according to Ryan, Republicans don't even have the votes to do that as it stands now to abolish the department, so maybe it's something we don't even need to worry about.
Congress has to vote for it, basically. He needs the 60 senators, and there's 53 Republicans, and I don't think most of the not most, but there's a lot of Republicans who would not support abolishing the Department of Education. So a formal closing it down is probably not going to happen, but reducing its size and scope of what it does will probably, happen.
So again,
What's frustrating is like Elon Musk is coming out here and saying that like the idea of the Department of Government Efficiency is just to really hold our bureaucrats in check, or that way our politicians, if they're not held in check, we have a bureaucracy, not a democracy. When the people have power and the government is in check, that's a democracy. But right now, our government is trying to perpetuate itself with bloat blue no matter who. It's Democrat no matter what. Excuse me. That it doesn't matter who it is. They want to keep these machines. They want to set up these things and have them running basically for eternity and just keep siphoning things up. Whether the income is a good thing or a bad thing, they're just like, yo, this is something we set up. We want to keep this money a moving.
for your students is not going away. Protections over students are not going away. Aid for school lunches is not going away. The Pell Grants aren't going away. They will hopefully just be run by people who are actually involved in those specific issues. Hopefully the person that is now overseeing school lunches will be RFK Jr. And hopefully this reallocation means that students' education will not just be increasing, but
School lunches are going to look like steak and eggs.
also their health
3 days
will
a
be
week.
increasing. And I also think that this could help spark fresh involvement from parents and students on the local level, because I want you guys to know that you actually have way more power than you think. Like, we really, honestly, do not have to wait for any of this to happen on the federal level. We do not need to wait for this executive order or for any of this to take effect to
I think we do.
make a change. And the school system in Miami-Dade County in Florida is a testament to this. Just listen.
In some districts, like in Miami-Dade, which is a conservative majority school board, you're seeing dynamic changes. You're seeing Singapore math in the classrooms. You're seeing classical reading levels now, reading going to K through 3, soon to be K through 5. They're trying things, and when school
Why do we have school lunches? Because school, at least for me, for public school, private school is different because you're paying into it. But for public school, the idea is that you're paying your tax dollars to go into this education system to educate your community. Not every kid in that community is going to be able to go home and have equal opportunities there. Some kids, a lot of kids go to school and their parents don't have the means to send them, provide them with a lunch and breakfast and stuff like that. So sometimes when the kids go to school and their only consistent meal throughout the day is that breakfast and lunch. That's why we have lunches, so to really help provide with the kids that don't really have a lot, to be able to, one, give them a break from education, because these kids are going to be bound up and have lots of energy anyway, so give them a break to socialize, intermingle, and whatnot, because that's super important. But it's also, for a lot of kids, the truth is a lot of kids, this is going to be their only stable meal, and that's why.
school boards are actually dynamic and have the ability to really make reforms, you're able to see
So
big
it's like a
improvements
midday meal in
education.
India? Yeah.
And all of that is incredible. They are getting a classical education in elementary school thanks to what the school board is doing and what they are willing to try and implement. Another great example that Ryan talked about were the states of Mississippi and Louisiana, who had the best student rebound in the country, in the entire nation, post-COVID, because of the steps that the local school boards and local legislators took. In fact, in Mississippi, 4th graders had achieved the #1 spot in the nation for gains on the NAEP in reading and in math, with 4th graders scoring higher than the nation's public school average in math and tying the nation in reading. In addition to that, 8th graders had outpaced the nation for growth in math and held steady in reading. Nationally, scores for most NAEP subjects dropped or remained flat. And in Louisiana, the results were similar. And the superintendent there credits this to getting back to the basics and credits it to states' rights. And he said this in a recent interview from just a couple days ago. He said, "I operate from what I call the BRAVE plan, going back to basics, redesigning systems, accelerating parental rights, valuing teachers, and expanding educational freedom." It's so funny how things get better and move more efficiently and faster when you remove the influence of government. He goes on and he says, "This department is organized to accomplish those things. That is the way that we..."
Having government rules and regulations is a good thing. We don't need complete anarchy. But when it gets so much so that every single time you want to move, you're trying to work around red tape or like government barricades, then that becomes an issue. When it becomes so in your face that it's no longer efficient, that it's kind of redundant and causes a regression instead of progression, that's when we got to come in here, rip off the Band-Aid, and make drastic changes like what we're seeing.
Push out resources, and it's what drives our conversation with community members, policymakers, and educators. It is a comprehensive set of reforms we put in place, and it's really encouraging to see movement. Right now, we also have a ton of alignment between our governor's office, our legislator, our state board, and our agency, and that united front helps with implementation in schools. I also think that we execute really well. I've had conversations with individuals in other states that have attempted similar reforms, but the execution wasn't what it needed to be. We are really intentional about both the initial launch of policies, but also support afterwards. And then continuing on, he said, "Many schools and systems and educators across the country have chased shiny things, and sometimes even ideologies that aren't necessarily relevant to simply teaching kids to read and do math. At a time when funding is becoming less plentiful," which is odd because, again, $238 billion budget, that really shouldn't.
Yeah, I say funding should be no issue, but unfortunately, unions and these CEOs and leadership positions, they got to make sure that their wallets and their pockets keep getting lined.
Be the case, states need to look at academic returns on investment. It's a really good time to focus on schooling, particularly in elementary schools. I mean, seriously, it is comical that this is something that a superintendent has to say.
It is crazy. It is comical. And Archive, you're saying in India, there are very well-known private schools like the DAV and DPS. You think private schools should be a norm? I don't disagree. I think private school, I think homeschooling should be an option, a more viable option. I think what's more, kids are the most important thing to any generation. The next generation coming after you, that is the most important thing. You should actively be working to be able to provide the same opportunities, if not more opportunities than you were granted, to that generation. Right? That way we keep progressing and keep innovating and being a good role model and all these different things. But with private schools being the norm, my only fear, once more, is I want to think about the people in the communities who are struggling day in and day out and can't even send their kids to school with a consistent lunch and allow that lunch to be, the consistent meal with the kids, whether it be breakfast, lunch, whatever, and activities in the social life. Like, I think that is a good thing, that if we're going to be the leaders of the free world and we want to push our communities to be better, I'm okay with my money, a little bit of my money, going into a program that helps educate, feed, give social stuff to kids to innovate, to make ideally better, smarter, in this case, Americans. But that's where my head's on it right now. That's my initial thought. With a little bit of time, it may change, but I doubt it. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, then please like the video, subscribe, and if you really like it, then share it with some of your friends. My goal here is to spread a positive message while sprinkling my 2 cents on big topics like American, Indian, and world geopolitics, and even small stuff like Twitch drama and online debacles. And if you want to see it live, come join me over on Twitch. Twitch.tv/ActuallyElrod. That's where I'm going to do all my reactions, and after the reactions, that's where we get down a game. And if you're like, hey, I have a video that I want this dude to sprinkle his 2 cents on, then come over on my Discord and let me know and join the community there. And while we're at it, I have to say thank you to everybody who has made that Discord just so poppin'. I never thought I'd have a Discord that's so flowing. It's really cool to see. Shout out to you, Bobby, Omni, Demon, all of you who have been in there who are just super active. Logie, you're the man. Logie is the one who's like modding and helping run the server, so thank you, Logie. Lastly, I challenge you. I have a challenge for you. Make somebody laugh today. We all know there's enough hate and vitriol in the world. If energy is contagious like the flu, then let's spread and get everyone contagious with our positive energy, right? Not negative energy, because there's so much of that. And if we could just be a small little change in someone's day, then you never know. Maybe that's the thing that starts shifting this world to a happier, healthier, just better place. And with all of that said and done, Thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.